For all the answers we got at the end of Endgame, there are still a few nagging questions that weren't entirely summed up by the time those credits rolled. Some of these questions go back multiple films in the franchise, while others were introduced in Endgame and then seemingly abandoned. What are we talking about? Snap on your spoiler gloves, because we're digging deep to find all the unanswered questions from Avengers Endgame. Once again, to be clear, spoilers ahead. There was a lot of mantle passing in the closing moments of Endgame, much of it in a heartwarming fashion. Old man Cap passing his shield onto Falcon? It doesn't get much better than that. We've got a more grown-up Cassie Lang in the picture, and Clint hit a bullseye with his daughter. But what about Iron Man? Who's set to replace him? The obvious choice is, of course, little Morgan Stark. Her father even died in a battle with an intergalactic wacko. Stuff that in a box and label it origin story. But if that's the timeline the MCU is taking, it raises the question, when is the next time we'll see a version of Iron Man on the big screen? Morgan's, 4 years old? Less than 5 for sure, because of the snappings. By the time she's old enough to strap on some nanites, the rest of the Avengers will be hanging up their own suits. Months before Endgame's release, a theory was making the rounds that Tony Stark would make his own Infinity Gauntlet and reverse Thanos' snap. It didn't happen quite like that, but the theory was pretty dang close, and it brought up some really interesting points that we were all hoping would get answered in Endgame. One is the idea that Tony has been feeling echoes across time from using the stones. Across several movies, Tony Stark has been having problems with his arm. If he had such immense power at his fingertips, some of that power might ripple backwards through time and give him arm problems as far back as Captain America's Civil War. But Infinity War brought that ripple even closer to home. Remember how Tony Stark had a dream that Pepper had a baby girl and they named her Morgan? A dream like that could have been another echo from the future, since future Tony knew that he had a daughter when he used the Infinity Stones. And its placement in the film just before Endgame has to be more than a coincidence.
Future us's, and that's it, just in case there's a monster in the closet, instead of,
shirts.
Unfortunately, it's all still just speculation, since Endgame never really addressed that in any way. Infinity War's big thing was unquestionably the snap. Thanos foreshadowed it, then the final battle came and he upheld his promise, turning half the universe into dust with a snap of his fingers. Cinematically, it's great. It's one instantly identifiable gesture of annihilation that also says, look how easy it is to clean up the universe. From a comics perspective, it holds up well, since that's what Thanos did in Infinity Gauntlet. So then Endgame comes along, and the only way to make the stones work is now snapping. Is that in the Infinity Manual? When Professor Hulk put on the glove the first time, he was clearly picturing what he wanted to happen, since he says he also tried to bring back Natasha. And in the final battle, both Tony and Thanos try snapping. The movie never answers the question of whether there are other ways to use all the stones. After all, if they're powerful enough to bring back trillions of life forms with all their memories and costumes intact, wouldn't just wishing be enough without the snap? Let's face it, any movie dealing with time travel is going to run into problems. For its part, though, Endgame did wrap up a lot of loose timelines, explain most of what needed explaining, and keep the plot moving. Out of all the time travel shenanigans, one question that was almost definitely intentionally left unanswered was the 2012 Loki's whereabouts. If you remember, while in the past after the Battle of New York, Stark fumbled the Tesseract, and Loki snagged it while no one was looking and slipped away into a portal. By doing so, he presumably created a different timeline that didn't end up with that version of himself being choked by Thanos. So now there's a rogue Loki roaming around another timeline, but the movie leaves that guy's fate completely unmentioned. What kind of mischief is he getting up to with the ability to travel anywhere in the universe?
I'm sorry about that thing with the Tesseract. I just couldn't help myself.
There's a huge disconnect between the way the Infinity Stones are built up in the previous movies and the way they're handled in Endgame. Literally handled. In Guardians of the Galaxy, the Collector gave a whole PowerPoint presentation that explained how only a being of extraordinary strength can wield an Infinity Stone. A few seconds later, his lady servant grabbed the Power Stone and exploded to prove to audiences that he wasn't lying. So sure, using the stones is devastating, but it's pretty clear what these stones can do to you just by touching them. Fast forward to the Endgame though, and people are tossing around the stones like hot potatoes. For starters, Hulk and Hawkeye both held a stone in their bare hands. Granted, those are plausible at least. The Hulk is, if nothing else, a being of immense power. And just like Thanos, Clint Barton was given the Soul Stone in exchange for his sacrifice. So maybe he was allowed to hold it. Even so, it's not like the stones in the gauntlet are shielded by anything, and yet half the Avengers got in on that game of keep away with the glove. None of those mortals even brushed a finger across an Infinity Stone? None of them caught it wrong or slapped a palm over a Reality Stone or two? When Peter Parker comes back during that epic final battle, he tells Tony that he must have passed out because when he woke up back on Titan, Stark was gone. The implication there is that time didn't pass for the people who were dusted. 5 years went by in the real world, but all the dust bunnies came back just thinking they'd taken a quick nap. It goes by pretty smoothly, mainly because there's so much other stuff happening then. But during the wrap-up scenes, when we see Peter back in school reuniting with Ned, you start to wonder, how is society going to reconcile what happened? It's convenient that all of Peter's friends were apparently also dusted, so now they get to finish going through high school together. But what about the rest of the world? Most of these people essentially blinked, and Citi Field suddenly looks like the apocalypse. Little Susie's in college. Grandpa Joe's kidneys failed. He's dead. Picture that, but multiplied by billions. The world is going to have a whole heck of a lot of work to do fixing things up, and Endgame didn't touch on that question at all. Finally, the most important question of all is, who does put mayo on a hot dog? Gross. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about Avengers Endgame are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.